Hi, Mike Brantley, Auctioneer, here with you today discussing whether auctioneer licensing, essentially a statewide model, is good or bad. Statewide licensing for auctioneers, which is approximately half the United States, maybe a little less, can involve things such as requiring auctioneers to go to auction school, can require them passing a test, possibly serving an apprenticeship of a certain period of time under a licensed auctioneer, renewing those licenses, continuing education as an auctioneer to maintain the license, and those kinds of things. And in a non-licensed state, and we have essentially half the United States in non-licensed states concerning auctioneers, how do you become an auctioneer? You hold out to the public, I'm an auctioneer, and you are. And so, is it better for consumers? Is it better for the public? Is it better for auctioneers to be in a licensed state or a non-licensed state? Well, here's some of the advantages of a licensed state. Once an auctioneer gets a license in a licensed state, they have been educated. They've had no choice but to become educated. They've probably attended auction school. They've probably had to pass a test. They likely have to take continuing education, and thus they're better educated than those in non-licensed states who do not go through that process. I don't think there's any question that a licensed auctioneer in a licensed state is exposed to more education, and almost a guarantee that they would be better educated. However, in a licensed state, there is typically some regulatory agency. That regulatory agency oversees auctioneers. That regulatory agency can be properly structured or improperly structured, I would argue. We'll talk about that in a subsequent video. Given that regulatory agency, there can be, say, a recovery fund for consumers. So if there's injury to a client, they can file a complaint. The auctioneer can be disciplined. They have a license, so that license can be taken away or disciplined in some other fashion. And as well, that recovery fund can pay out proceeds to a client. Where an auctioneer maybe didn't pay a consignor $10,000, the recovery fund pays out that $10,000 to that consumer. It keeps that consumer from having to file a complaint in a county or state court to try to recover, hiring an attorney and all that kind of thing. So those are licensed state issues. There's also the issue of barrier to entry, and a lot of conversation around the United States about that, in that in a licensed state, there's a higher barrier to entry. Typically, we find, not surprisingly, auctioneers in licensed states being in favor of licensing, because that tends to keep other people out of the profession, and people in non-licensed states think non-licensing is proper because that's what they're used to. Maybe we're just the kind of folks that like what we're exposed to. So easier to become an auctioneer in a non-licensed state because you just simply say you are. The marketplace can determine whether you succeed or don't succeed in the auction business in a non-licensed state. If you do a good job, people tend to hire you. If you do a bad job, and with social media and other outlets for people expressing their point of view about you and your company, obviously, if you're not doing a good job in a licensed state, people probably aren't going to hire you. And in a licensed state, if you don't do a good job, you might lose that license and not be able to practice at all. So, lastly, there's some issues with licensed states that non-licensed states would benefit from in some way, but there's just no way to do it. Licensed states have what's called a preemption of local licensing. Not all licensed states have this, but many do. And so if I have a statewide license in a current state, then no city, township, municipality, political subdivision can require a license, because that state license preempts local licensing. So if I'm licensed in a state, then I'm licensed in that entire state. I can do an auction in any part of that state without any local regulation. Two, with a licensed state, there's the issue of reciprocity. So if I get a license in my state and another state and my state have a reciprocal arrangement, I can get another license in another reciprocal state without taking a test, without going to school. I just prove that I'm properly licensed in my home state, and I can get a license in the other state, paying a fee, of course, but getting that license. So that can make auction licensing in an auctioneer's home state, can make it easier for that auctioneer to operate in other states. See, if you're in a non-licensed state, you don't have any reciprocal arrangements with any licensed states because you're not a licensed auctioneer, and you may have to, in some cases, live in the state where you hold that license to activate the reciprocal arrangement. So I think on balance, licensed states better protect the public than non-licensed states. I think auctioneers on balance are better educated in licensed states than non-licensed states. But I think there's merits to both, and I think we're seeing in the United States here in 2020 and thereon, I suspect, an effort to get rid of some occupational licensing. There's been a major push to eliminate many occupational licenses. So don't be surprised, auctioneers or others, if your state considers getting rid of and or gets rid of your license in an effort to lower barrier to entry and reduce what they would call unnecessarily regulating occupations. Mike Brantley, Auctioneer, pleasure to be with you today. Good to see everybody. Other videos on this same page, others forthcoming. Have a great day and stay safe.